Okay, here we go with the practice problems for rational exponents. All right, so we have two parts here. We have part 1 and we have part 2, just like in our notes. Okay, so we're going to break them up like that. So let me zoom in so we can kind of focus in on one part. Okay, here we go. So the very first one right here, we have, let's read the instructions first. It says practice translating expressions in radical and exponential form. Okay, so the first one I have 14 to the 1/2 power. So we learned in our notes that our denominator tells us the root. Okay, so basically it's asking us to take the square root of 14, which is saying which two numbers can we multiply together to equal 14. Since there's not two numbers that we can multiply together to give us 14, then we would just leave our answer like that. Done. Next, I'm going to keep changing up the colors. All right, next we have 5x to the 1/2 power. Okay, so one thing you need to understand is that this 1/2 exponent is only dealing with this x. Okay, so that's just like saying the square root of x. So that would be 5 times the square root of x. Okay, because that 2 right there tells us the root, so that you can just put a little 2 there if you want. Okay, since we obviously don't know what number they're taking the square root of, that cannot be simplified anymore. Okay, so it would just be 5 square roots of x. Okay, we're just simplifying these, just like we did in the last 2 exponent units. We're not actually really solving for anything unless there's an opportunity where we can, which you'll see that here in a second. All right, so we have 17 times y to the 1/3. Okay, so again, this y to the 1/3 is separate from that 17. So that denominator tells us the root. So that's going to be 17 times the cubed root of y. Okay, and you would just leave it like that because we don't know what number we're taking the cubed root of, so we can't do anything. All right, next, that 2 tells us the root. So we're taking the, let me change up the color. We're taking the square root of 49. So unlike our first one with 14, 49 does have a number that you can multiply by itself 2 times to give you 49, and that number is 7. 7 times 7 equals 49. Okay, so that one we could simplify. Next, we have 25 to the 1/2. So again, that denominator tells us the root. This numerator tells us if we're going to take it to another power, but since it's 1, it doesn't really affect it. So that's kind of why I'm not drawing attention to that, to the numerator just yet, when it's 1. Okay, so that's taking the square root of 25. So the question is, are there two numbers that we can multiply by itself to equal 25? Yes, we can. It's 5. All right, last one on this row is 27 to the 1/3 power. So that 3 tells us the root. So we're taking the cubed root of 27. So is there a number that we can multiply 3 times that equals 27? We can. It is 3. I had to double check my notes, but yes, it's 3. Because we can do 3 times 3 times 3, and that equals 27. It's a horrible error. 27. Yay, first row is done. Next row. Stick with the theme here. All right, so we have x to the 1/3 power. Okay, this is just like the one we did up here. Okay, that denominator tells us the root. So we're just taking the cubed root of x. And that's all we can do because we don't know what x is, so we can't take the cubed root of it. It would just be that. All right, next one, we have 19 times a times b squared equals, 19 times a times b to the 1/2, and we want to simplify that. Now this 1/2 is just with the b. Okay, So we can't really do anything with that 19 and that a, so we're just going to bring it down. All right, and then this number tells us the root. Y'all are going to probably get tired of hearing me saying that every time. So we're going to take the square root of b. And we can't simplify any more than that. Next, we have, now we're starting it in radical form as a fourth root, and it wants us to change it to exponential form, okay? So remember, whatever the root is, it's just going to be the denominator. It's not being taken to another power, so the numerator is just going to be 1. So it's going to be y to the 1/4. Okay, next we have 64 to the 1/3. So remember that denominator is the root. So we have the cubed root of 64. Okay, so is there a number that we can multiply by itself 3 times to equal 64? Yes, we can. It is 4. Now, if you just don't know that off the top of your head, again, download the TI-84 calculator app on your phone. It's free. Do it. It will help. Okay. Next, we have 100 to the 1/2 power. So we know that the denominator gives us the root. So we're taking the square root of 100, which what times what gives us 100? 10. Now remember that those numbers that you're multiplying by itself has to be the same number. It can't be like 50 times 2 gives you 100. It has to be 10 times 10 or 2 times 2 or 3 times 3. It has to be the same number you're multiplying. All right, last one on this row is 16 to the 4th. So we know that the root is going to be our denominator. 16 is our base. 16 to the 1/4. So what can we multiply by itself 4 times to equal 16? And that is going to be 2. Okay. Last row for part 1. So we have 12n, the square root of 12n. So this is a square root, and it's being taken of all of this, 12 and n. Okay, so we know the root is going to be our denominator. Okay, it's not being taken to another exponent, so the numerator is just going to be 1. So it's going to be 12n, let me write this down here, 12n to the 1/2 power. And all of the 12n is going to be taken to the 1/2. Okay, because all of it's underneath the square root. Next, you know whatever, oops, let me change my color. Gotta keep it consistent. All right, so we are taking it of the cubed root. Okay, so we're taking the cubed root of b. Well, whatever this number is our denominator. So that's going to be our base for 1/3. Okay. Next, we're taking the square root of 37, so that's 37 to the 1/2 power. Okay, there's not a number that you can multiply by itself to equal 37, so you would just leave it like this. You can't simplify it any further. Next, we are taking the square root of 144. So that's going to be 144 to the 1/2 power. So what times what? What can you multiply by itself to equal 144? And that would be 12. And the more you do square roots and stuff, the more you'll just start to remember them. It'll kind of be like your multiplication facts. Those are just going to be things you just remember. Okay? Because there's a lot of math problems just use over and over again. So that makes it easier. All right, now we have the cubed root of 125. So this number is going to be my denominator of my fractional exponent. That's 125 to the 1/3. So that's going to be, we can simplify that further because there is a number you can multiply by itself 3 times to equal 125, and that's 5. 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 5 is 125. So, all right, last one of part 1 is going to be the square root of 64, aka 64 to the 1/2 power. So what number can we multiply 2 times to equal 64? And that's going to be 8. All right, that's it for part 1. I'm going to make a separate video for part 2 just so it's not too overwhelming. You can walk away, take a little break, and then come back to it.